20 to order, and if you would please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sandy? Tonight we do have some swearing in, and Sandy's going to take care of that for us.
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the Charter and ordinances of the City of Cadillac, and will faithfully perform the duties of the office of council member according to the best of my ability.
I will.
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Michigan, the Charter and ordinances of the City of Cadillac, and will faithfully perform the duties of the office of member according to the best of my ability.
You're all official.
We're all official.
Yay.
Okay, Sandy, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Shippers, Allenboss,
Here.
Ingalls,
Here.
King,
Here.
Mayor Folkins.
Here. This time, look for a motion to approve the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support?
Councilmember Allenboss,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Shippers, Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries. This time, we'll open the floor for our first public comment. We do ask if you come forward that you state your first name, and then if you would write your full name and your address for the clerk, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Good evening, Mayor Filkins, Commissioners. I'm Doug DeYoung. I'm the Community Affairs Manager for Consumers Energy. I'm here tonight to present the city with a check for $2,500 for our tree grant program. This has been a multi-year grant program that we've been working with the city. Matter of fact, in the past 6 years, over $15,000 has gone into this program, and it's really dedicated to replenishing the trees in the community and replenishing our partnership, continuing that partnership to replenish those trees. So I'd like to thank you for this partnership and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. And really, this grant is really part of our mission across the state to really look at the planet and how we impact the planet and how we can impact the communities that we serve and really provide that opportunity for communities to thrive. And so with that, I'll present the check for $2,500 and just thank you for this opportunity this evening.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Robert McCurran. I'm from Ann Arbor, and I'm intending to apply for medical marijuana and adult use marijuana license at 501 North Mitchell. I've been here and spoke before. It's nice to be back. Thank you for your time, Mayor Filkins and the council members. Just a couple of questions about the ordinance being discussed tonight and comments along with that. We appreciate all the work that's gone into this and are just trying to understand the details of the ordinance that's being proposed and perhaps some considerations for potential effects with the language that's in the ordinance.
If I could interject, we are holding a public hearing this evening on this subject.
Okay.
And so if your comments are related to that, perhaps that's a better
Hold them till
time
then. Okay.
for you to share those.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, we'll close the public comments and move to the approval of the consent agenda. And this evening, we do have the minutes from the regular meeting that was held on December 16th of 2019.
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Councilmember Ingalls?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Shippers? Ellenboss?
Yes.
Mayor Folkins?
Yes, motion carries. So then that does take us to the first public hearing for this evening. Marcus, would you like to introduce that?
Yes, and I'm going to then also introduce the city attorney that'll provide just a brief walkthrough of what we're doing. There are two public hearings this evening. We're looking at perhaps doing one, essentially one brief, to cover both. The public hearings are regarding a change to our recreational marijuana related ordinance, as well as our medical marijuana related ordinance. Specifically, the modification that was introduced at your last council meeting that the public hearings are on this evening pertain to the ability for the city to accept multiple applications on a single property, whereas under the original draft of the ordinance that was previously approved, the city would not be able to accept more than one application per property. Where this might be, where this might come into play would be if a property is a strip mall or a property with multiple suites or storefronts. Mike, if you could perhaps now provide more of the salient legal differences or changes that we're making and how this would impact applicants, that'd be great. And here's my mic also, because it's sometimes hard to hear us.
So the proposed amendments are virtually identical with respect to medical and marijuana, so I'll only cover the substance of that. As the city manager indicated, it would allow co-location of establishments permitted in the city where the current ordinance does not address that. That would include both medical as well as the recreational side, and both of those would allow medical to be located or co-located with recreational in the same establishment and vice versa as well. The two amendments would also extend, as drafted, the initial receipt period for applications from will commence December the 9th and would end February 28th, 2020 at 4 p.m.
Versus January 31st.
Versus January 31st, which is the current initial period. That extension of the deadline is necessary because of the effective date of the ordinance amendments, which is 20 days, so extending that initial period. Then if you have more applications and there are permits available, there would be a competitive process in that.
What about for applications that are already coming in? Any ability of processing now versus holding back or holding it all back? I know there's been some conversation back and forth on that piece.
Well, the way it's drafted now, the initial receipt period would be extended for all applications. So whether the council wants to consider any applications received prior to the initial period right now, January 31st, I believe you can do so because those other applications, particularly for co-location, cannot be decided on until the ordinance becomes effective, which is 20 days from the date of adoption. So 20 days from...
Which is where the 20th came from.
Correct, yes.
Can you highlight the part about separate entrances in the state law really quick?
Separate entrances?
Yeah, with the co-locations.
Yeah, so both of the, even with co-locations, we're talking about, as Marcus mentioned, the ability to co-locate on one premise, like in a strip mall or other type of shared property, but each of them would be considered a separate premise. Each of them would have to have an application relative to each of those. along with separate entrances for those. I presume, although I shouldn't, that those would be owned by different owners. I suppose you could have multiple applications for those. The ordinance contemplates that happening, but in the end, you've only got so many permits to grant.
Does this mean that we could have 2 recreational marijuana businesses in a strip mall?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. That's the way they did it in Breckenridge. They kicked them out of downtown, and they ended up in a strip mall almost next door to each other. And plus, it's easier for law enforcement initially. We're going to have the long lines, and they might have to go out there, and it's easier if they're both in the same place in that respect.
That could be the case.
Yeah.
But yes, it would allow.
Okay.
And just a little more background, the city was approached with this potential conflict whereby an owner of a strip mall had mentioned that they're being solicited by a couple of different companies that are interested in applying, but under the current rule, the city would only be able to accept one application for that entire property. And that was never really what our intent was. Our intent was to be able to accept as many applications that come in, as long as all of the applications are in order in terms of the criteria that we need met, as long as it's met. And so by making this, this modification to the ordinance that's in place, that resolves that issue. Doesn't necessarily resolve the question about whether or not we should process what we already have, or whether we should just hold everything back until the 28th, and that's really more of a policy type question, I think. This is obviously our first go-around with all of this. Should we have additional applicants that come in, we would still process those even after the deadline that are set. We would have no choice but to do that.
So what day will application period conclude under the new ordinance?
So under the new ordinance, applications across the board would be available to be submitted until the 28th of February. Yes, of February. We do have an application in currently under what was already out there with the January 31st deadline. So the question that council is really being asked is whether or not we hold everything back until the 28th, or whether hold everything back until the 28th of February, or whether we process what we already have after the January 31st cutoff, and then only process any applications that come in for licenses that are still available, as well as applications that come in where it's for co-location on properties. Because applications that come in for co-location would not be able to be processed until after the ordinance takes effect, which is why that date was the 28th. I know it sounds confusing the way I'm saying it. I apologize. I'm going to try to clarify that. So the question is, do we hold everything back until the 28th, or do we process what we have essentially received by the 31st, draw that line, and then only look forward at processing applications after the 28th for either A, licenses that are coming in for co-location on properties, or B, applications for licenses that come in for other license types that have not yet already been granted. Because remember, there's about a dozen different license classifications that we're going to be considering. So, and then, of course, this is a public hearing, so I'm going to stop talking.
Okay.
Kick it back to you, Mayor, to
Okay.
open the floor, and then
All right.
council can discuss. So,
Okay, so at this time, we'll open the floor for public comment as it relates to this public hearing only. Same format. If you come up and say your first name and then provide your full name and your address for the clerk, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Okay, thank you for the advice to delay. That helped a lot. Rob McCurran from 2950 Ann Arbor, Newport Road, Ann Arbor, Michigan. And as I said, we're intending to apply at 501 North Mitchell. I appreciate the deliberation, and it definitely has helped us understand the amendment a little bit better. A couple of additional questions that we're still trying to understand. One, we would hope that the application deadline will be universally moved towards the same point. There's a lot of people like us, I believe, that have been, awaiting these deliberations and understand that there was contemplation of a delay and have held off submitting our application until we had more clarity on exactly what the ordinance was going to be. And seems like we'd be at a significant disadvantage of being able to apply at this point with, less than a week to put an application in to meet the initial deadline that is being contemplated and extended. In addition to that, around the co-location, we were certainly advocates for co-location of medical and recreational in one location, primarily from the retail standpoint, but also from our experience with grow and processing being co-located in one location at another site that we have in the state that would help supply our store here if we're able to get it. And that makes perfect sense for, say, in our operation, we have a grow and a processing in one building. Those really do need to have complete separation with separate entrances and exits, as well as completely separate operations. Having a retail store with medical and then applying subsequently for adult use on top of that, the state has very clear regulations on that process and very clear stringent processes to separate the customers from medical and recreational supply. That's well spelled out, and it specifically does not require separate entrances and exits or division of the store on the inside to comply with that. That's in, I think it's Article 32 in the state ordinance that kind of spells out that. And again, I'm not, I just want to point out that there's a bit of a discrepancy between the state regulation and what's being proposed here, if I understand correctly what's being suggested. So our thought is that certainly at the retail level, requiring separation from adult use and medical doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's clearly spelled out, and I think, there's a clear process for how that works in the stores that are already established around the states. But generally, there's common entrance and exit, but separate point of sale, separate inventory, separate tracking systems that are all, again, very well spelled out and required at the state level. So that's one point for consideration. The other final point that I wanted to bring up is this question around multiple applications for one location. Certainly, I wanted to clarify that the understanding would be that you can only apply for that location if you have the rights to the property, either through a lease or a purchase agreement, that type of thing. Concern being that
Excuse me,
yes.
Your 3 minutes is up, so
Okay.
if you could please wrap that up.
Okay. The final thing is that it is possible, as I understand the way this is written currently, for a single group of owners to apply at one location, whether that's a strip mall or if it was a single location with multiple different entities with the same ownership, simply to kind of game the system and have multiple entries into a lottery system if it gets to that point. And there's really no benefit to, and that puts everyone in a position of having to try to play that game of putting multiple applications in on one location. I don't know if that's been contemplated, but certainly something worth considering.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is John Taylor, 2522 East Shore Drive, Portage, Michigan. I want to thank you guys for your service. I was a county commissioner for 14 years, chair for 4, so I know your thankless hours and nights that you're putting into this. Thank you again. I own a medical marijuana provisioning center as well as a grow operation in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and we intend on applying in the Cadillac market as well. And I just wanted to emphasize the previous gentleman's point as far as the tracking system of inventory. He's absolutely correct. The state has strict guidelines in the tracking of inventory. The separate entrances and the separate doors, while not an overcoming problem, would just be one additional burden that we'd have to, as an industry, have to go through. Not the end of the world. One of the questions I had, doesn't have to, I know there's no back and forth here, but one of the questions I had is, do they have to be separate addresses originally, or can you have a list of large building? We plan on applying for the location up at the old Allegra printing north of town, that location. So we plan on submitting a bid. We've got our rough draft for our bid right now. We're just trying to gain more understanding of what you are as a city are actually, or what you're looking for in an organization to come to town. So thank you again for this opportunity, and look forward to meeting more of you as the days go on. Thanks.
Okay, seeing no one else, we'll close public comment and move to any further discussion among the council or questions that the council may have.
Do you want to address some of the questions? Well, as the draft is written right now, it would require each of the licensed establishments to have a separate entrance and exit, separate inventory, separate record keeping, separate point of sale. It seems to me that the only public comment and the questions revolve around whether or not the city's going to require a separate entrance. So,
What about the separate address?
the separate address is not specifically addressed, although I would say that what is addressed in there for the information is the current property. If the current property owner, this is under the proposed amendment, and I'm looking at the recreational 10.02-03 B4E, which would then state under E, if the current property owner is different than the applicant, example where the applicant has a lease option, land contract, or other future interest in the property owner's signature is required in addition to the applicant's signature. I suspect that regardless of where you locate these uses, they will end up having separate addresses, because I'm not sure otherwise how you're going to separate utility costs, mail, all of those things that go along with those. So it's not separately addressed in this proposed amendment, whether or not separate addresses. I suspect that as long as you can identify those premises by way of that lease agreement or otherwise.
Suite A and the Suite B.
Correct, yeah.
If I can throw something out to council as well, when council went through discussion and deliberations insofar as establishing essentially the policy that became the ordinance, the discussion was around stacking versus not stacking, right? Stacking of different license types to be operating within one location versus not, and the determination was to not stack the licensing, to not have the different uses, the medical use and the recreational use sort of blended into one storefront. I think we're still at that same place. Perhaps one way of trying to maybe soften where things are at is I don't think it matters to the city per se where the inventory is located necessarily, nor would it matter to the city how they do their record keeping, unless there's something there that you're concerned with on those two ends. I think so the issue is really focusing in on having, if you're selling medical products and soliciting a medical clientele, keeping that part and parcel from the adult use clients and the feel of that store. One's medical with folks with medical issues, one's not. I don't think the city needs to be in the business of determining where they're getting the stock from or how they're keeping those records necessarily. We're not going to be reviewing those records.
Law.
That's right. That's the state, and the state does allow that. So, my sort of 2 cents as council picks up deliberations this evening would be we can simply strike that within what's proposed tonight to remove the separate record keeping and separate inventory portion from the very beginning part of the ordinance. If that makes any sense. We would want to keep in, of course, the separate point of sales, otherwise that kind of defeats the purpose. But
You talk about like
it's like cash register, yeah, so you have cash registers.
So if someone wanted to flood our license process, though this is slightly different topic, but don't we have like a non-refundable?
Yes.
It's at $5,000.
Yep.
So they would have to then, and would there be a way they would all, because when they submit an application, they would then have to sign whether they own the building or whether they had a lease option. They would multiple would multiple people be able to flood the application process, like the gentleman suggested? Like if it was a group of people that were all trying to get the same, I mean, they could all pay their,
company.
yeah.
I mean, I suppose anybody could apply, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah,
same
anybody,
property.
yes, anybody could apply on the same property.
Yeah,
You-
I
you
mean,
may hit-
I
They were-
think the ordinance is drafted, you know, what it doesn't prohibit are multiple option contracts. Say, for example,
Multiple option contracts, okay.
correct. So, say, for example, you had multiple applications. Let's suppose one of those gets accepted. Those option contracts on the others, I suspect, would go by the wayside. That person then would end up leasing that facility, right? But I suppose you could have multiple option contracts submitted with applications for that particular location.
And we have a scoring process, and then those applications are reviewed by do you remember who's on the board? Can you tell me? Who's
The chair of our planning commission, our community development director, our public safety director, city attorney, and myself.
So I can't imagine anybody flooding the application process would do anything but cost them a lot more money. You know.
Right. And it
Unless-
it doesn't equal more points.
Yeah.
It's not like you get points per applications.
And
It
So,
would come at a great expense to them.
Yeah, and I don't think it would help much. Also, like artificially dividing a building and entrance, whether it's a Allegra building or any building, establishing two separate entrances and throwing up dividers, that's not disallowed, right? That's what we
no,
would be
that's what we're
expecting.
encouraging,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And I would say with these proposed amendments would move uniformly the initial application period, so everybody be on the same playing field with respect to the deadline,
To February 28th.
to February 28th.
And I guess my only question is, are we disadvantaging anybody that's applied under the rules that set the January 1st deadline and has done everything they're supposed to do to be positioned so that theirs would be considered and acted upon by January 31st, which there's still time to submit applications. So do we need to consider saying, yes, the people that got it in under the current rules before our amendment, we would process those applications, assuming they're not co-located applications because they
Well, that
wouldn't
certainly
have
was
put
an
it
option
in.
that was,
And then obviously, after that point, it's open to the co-location up to February 28th.
and the rest of the single license.
Yes.
I feel like this is in the best interest of the city, even if it does disadvantage the applicant slightly for getting all the paperwork in on time. I mean, the whole point of the review process too, I think, was we want to get away from that first come first served type mentality. So I think this is, the best thing for the city anyway. So
You're saying
That's my
having
opinion.
all applications in hand and then having the discussion?
yeah, I'm saying I'm for extending the deadline to February 28th and then acting on applications.
For
I think that's
everyone.
in the best interest of the city anyways. So
Okay.
I mean,
I would agree with that. Go with that.
Okay, is anyone ready to make a motion for consideration?
I have one last question.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And Mike, this is partially for you.
I'll back up.
No, you're okay. Our ordinance requires that anyone who applies has to follow state law. And therefore, to Marcus's comment, should we amend that language in the first paragraph because it's really incidental to the fact that they have to follow state law? Does that make it easier as far as the state's enforcement too? Because they're the ones that are regulating these locations.
I don't think that language matters. I mean, with respect to the separate entrances, you could keep or discard that. The other stuff, like you said, is required by state law. So, yes, you can. I don't
I would s-
necessarily want to rewrite it on the fly, however.
No, but if we
Right.
just remove that language, as Marcus suggests, does that make, the state's enforcement, it's just cleaner?
Are you referring to the separate record
Yes.
keeping? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that it makes it any more or less enforceable. I mean, sitting here right now, my preference would be leave it alone. It's a requirement of state law. The mere fact that you have it in your ordinance isn't going to make it any less enforceable by the state.
Okay.
And in fact, I would say, we're not likely going to enforce those provisions that will be enforceable by the state.
Right.
Right, okay.
But I will say, what about in terms of inspections? I mean, if we're saying that they need to have a separate inventory area, and then we inspect the building, and they don't have a separate inventory area, then they're non-compliant with our law, which is what I was suggesting
And
we
with-
just strike it.
And likely with the state.
Oh, I thought the testimony we heard today was that the state doesn't require that.
The state has a rigorous, like you said, a rigorous requirements for
Yeah.
tracking inventory. So,
Okay.
but my preference would be to
Just
not
keep it?
rewrite it on the fly.
And
Okay.
actually, I'm just noticing right now, we have in parens after that whole thing, if applicable.
If applicable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll leave it alone.
So what do you mean if applicable? That each licensed establishment must operate. So what is the if applicable referring to then?
If that's required by state law.
So
then
we,
we're gonna
we
follow
don't. So we are not requiring separate entrances.
We
Is
are.
that read? If
We are
these,
requiring.
if the state law, can you explain the if applicable then? Like, so I know you're.
that.
What
Mhm.
you
No, I
just
think
said,
it's a
but
good
then
question.
it sounds like the opposite of what they just said.
That modifier, I believe, applies to the separate point of sale operations.
Okay, I gotcha.
Okay, is anyone comfortable making the motion to approve the resolution?
Yes, I believe we're in agreement that we're going, without the modifier, like we said. So I will make a motion to approve the resolution to adopt ordinance to amend section 10-2 of the Cadillac City Code for the recreational marijuana.
Do we have support?
I'll support it.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Shippers, Ellenboss,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries.
Mayor, members of the city council, part 2 now is regarding the medical ordinance, and it's the same.
Content, same everything?
Ditto.
Ditto. So, because all of the information is the same, I will open the floor for the public comment as it relates to this hearing, knowing you've already heard all of the information. But if there are any additional comments, we would love to hear them.
Really quick, one question. John Taylor, 2522 East Shore Drive, Portage, Michigan. The point system, I envision, I've been doing this in a lot of different municipalities throughout the state, and it gets down to, you'll probably have 12 to 15 applications, and I'd say probably 5 to 10 of them will meet your max point scenario or close to it. In Grand Rapids, for instance, there was one company that put in the $5,000 applications. I think they put in 22 of them. So that just to let you know, to prepare you for that. The question I had is the point system. As you're going through to dictate the points, there were several areas where they said this many points for this, and it listed maybe 2 or 3 things, and it didn't differentiate how many points go to each individual one. Expecting, we're going to try our hardest to get the max amount of points, as I expect most legitimate companies will do when they apply here. But just as far as clarification on the point system. Thank you.
Who would the applicants ask for guidance on that? Just really quick. I know we're
Talk
still.
about that
Okay.
in a minute. Okay, seeing no one else, we'll close public comment and move to discussion and seek clarification perhaps.
Yeah, if a company's filling out their application and they wanted direct guidance on what would this be a better position than this, can they come to you with that? Can they come
Sure.
to us with that?
Yes, we've been fielding questions that have been coming in, phone calls, probably 1 call or 2 calls at the most a week. Some are repeat calls, some are from the same folks. Myself, members of my staff have met with people to talk. We've had the city attorney, their office prepare a couple of different responses back to some of the questions. But ultimately, there is a scoring matrix. There are several categories with a point system that's applied to each of those categories, and the categories do cover several areas in each. And so it'll be up to each individual member of the committee as to how they intend to score each of the different categories.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, the committee, because we've had these discussion, it's a competitive process, and we're not going to let people contact individual members to try and work the system. The whole point is to select those applicants who are best suited for the city itself.
Okay. All right. Is there any further discussion, or is someone comfortable making the motion to approve the resolution?
All right, I will make a motion to approve the resolution to adopt ordinance to amend section 10-3 of the Cadillac City Code for the medical marijuana.
Support.
Councilmember Shippers, Ellenboss,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, the next thing we have on our agenda this evening is communications, and tonight we have an important communication.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. This evening, we have Joe Verlin here with Gaybridge and Company, who will take the next 10 minutes or so and present the findings of the 2019 audit.
Good evening. I would like to thank the City Council for allowing us to serve as your audit firm. It remains a pleasure working with the city staff. They continue to do a wonderful job providing us with the information that we need in order to be able to perform the audit. So they provide to us a set of financial statements, and we go through the process of verifying the revenues and expenses and all the balances of the city, working with the state of Michigan and the county, as well as various financial institutions. And we get to the point where we render an opinion. This year's opinion was clean. Before I get to that, I do want to point out on page 5 that in the city of Cadillac, this is page 5 shows a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting. It is worth pointing this out because this demonstrates the city going above and beyond what it needs to do in order to submit an audit with the state of Michigan. This certificate demonstrates the city's commitment to excellence. Not only is a financial statement audit report included in this 189-page packet, there's an introductory letter. It explains various demographic and information of the city, points out some of the highlights behind the city's financial condition. And then the back end of the report has 30 pages of statistical data, shows 10-year comparative information about the city's taxable values, its tax base, its long-term debt, things of that nature. So a lot of departments contribute to putting this together. In the state of Michigan last year, 65 local units of government received this award, which is less than 4%, about 3.7%. So really kudos to the staff and all of the various departments that contribute to putting this together. It really demonstrates the city's commitment to transparency and providing information to its residents. If you turn now to page 9, we get to the opinion paragraph for the city's audit report. And I would think of this as being a clean opinion. I made the mistake of calling it an unmodified opinion to one of my clients, and she was in tears and wanted to know what she needed to do to make sure that never happened again. And I'm like, oh, actually, unmodified is the best level of an opinion we can provide on financial statements. Because we were able to verify all of the key activities and balances of the city, we state, in our opinion, that financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the city as of June 30, 2019. It should always be the city's goal to have the unmodified opinion or the clean opinion, but it does mean something to achieve it. We have had larger organizations with either adverse or qualified opinions. Basically, the city's controls are suitably designed to make sure that accurate and timely financial statements are being provided as part of the audit process. If you turn now to page 12, I'm not going to go through all 189 pages tonight. If you turn to page 12, we get into the management discussion and analysis section of the audit report. This section I think is useful because it points out financial highlights. It shows 2-year comparative data, so you can get an idea for the trends that the city is showing with its revenues and expenses over the past couple of years. And it provides a lot of narrative explaining reasons behind the significant changes during the past couple of years. So starting on page 12, going through the financial highlights, the first bullet point shows that the net position of the city was $31.8 million at June 30, 2019. This is on the accrual or the long-term basis of accounting, same basis of accounting that a corporation would use. So we're factoring into that number assets such as infrastructure, streets, buildings, vehicles. Long-term debt is backed off. Theoretically, if the city were to sell all of its assets and pay off its liabilities, there'd be $31.8 million left over. Of course, the city has no intention of doing that, so it's a hypothetical number, but we do like to see that number increase over time. Moving through that first bullet point, we can see that number increased by $828,000. So in other words, revenues exceeded expenses. Tells the reader that the city is in better financial condition at June 30, 2019 compared to 2018. So things are trending in the right direction. Second bullet point down shows that the fund balance of the city, fund balance, it's still the residual or the equity, but this is a short-term basis of accounting. This is, I would think of it as being cash basis, where the immediate assets compared to the immediate obligations, the difference being fund balance. Very short-term focus. Fund balance came in at $7.1 million, which was a decrease of just over $600,000 during 2019. The primary reason for that decrease was the fact that the city expended over $1 million on long-term capital projects. So the market at the Cadillac Commons, as well as a couple of large pieces of equipment, a snowplow truck, as well as street improvement projects. Those were the reasons for the overall decrease in fund balance, but we can actually see that the general fund had an increase in its fund balance during the year of about $500,000. So the most important fund had an increase. All the other funds had about a $1 million decrease in fund balance, but that was intentional. There were prior year revenues that the city collected that were expended on these projects. The fourth bullet point shows that the city has $1.3 million of unassigned fund balance in its general fund. So if we take all of look at the fund balances of the city, we back off everything that's earmarked for specific purposes or restricted, there's $1.3 million available to cover the day-to-day cost of operating the city. And if we take that and divide it by the annualized expenditures and transfers out of the general fund, you guys, the city of Cadillac has 19% sitting in its unassigned reserves. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends having 2 months or about 17%. So because right where you need to be. Stable financial condition, not too much, not too little. 19% is very healthy. Moving through the report, if you turn now to page 16, just a couple of quick items I wanted to point out here. 2 rows up from the bottom in the governmental activities. In the top schedule, 2019 shows a deficit unrestricted net position of $865,000. It's rounded to the nearest thousand. Of that amount, $5.9 million of long-term liabilities have been added to the city's statement of net position for retiree health care, and as well as the defined benefit pension plan. Over the past 5 years, these are relatively new liabilities that the city is reporting because of new accounting pronouncements. That is the reasons that the city is reporting a deficit, unrestricted net position in the governmental activities. But if you look at the year before, it's about $400,000 less. So even that number is trending in the right direction. And if you look at the total 2019 unrestricted net position, 2 rows up from the bottom, altogether across all of the funds of the city, the governmental funds and the business type funds, it's actually a positive $493,000. Most of our clients who have both defined benefit pension and defined benefit retiree health care have deficit unrestricted net positions. So you guys are certainly in better financial condition than many local units of government providing that same level of benefits to its retirees. If you turn now to page 26, we get a look at the governmental funds balance sheet. Just quickly wanted to point out here, first column on this page, all of these statements are on the modified accrual or the cash basis of accounting. So long-term capital assets are excluded, long-term liabilities are excluded. Here, the general fund, we can see the total fund balance in the general fund, 2 rows up from the bottom of $3.4 million. The next row up, we can see the unassigned fund balance of $1.3 million. And what I wanted to point out here is that all the other funds of the city have positive fund balances too. So not only is the general fund in stable financial condition, the other funds of the city are reporting positive fund balances as well. If you turn 2 more pages to page 28, we get a look at the revenues and the expenditures still on the modified accrual or the cash basis of accounting. And here we can see general fund had an increase in fund balance of $510,872 during the 12 months ended June 30, 2019. That's the first column, 3 rows up from the bottom. And if you look at the Major Street Fund, there was about a $60,000 decrease in fund balance, but halfway down you can see capital outlay came in at $337,000. The next column over, all the other governmental funds are deemed to be non-major. They had $1.5 million of capital outlay expenditures during the year, leading to the three rows up from the bottom, a decrease in fund balance of just under $1.1 million. So there we can see certainly the primary reason for that decrease in fund balance being the capital outlay expenditures during the year. If you turn now to page 31, I did want to point out one schedule in the business type funds of the city, primarily the water and sewer fund. That being the first column on page 31, we can see that the revenues exceeded the expenses by $323,372, leading to the ending. Now we're changing our measurement focus. It's long term, so now we're calling it net position instead of fund balance. But we can see that it's increasing, which is important. So in other words, revenues are set at a level to make sure that the city's covering its expenses from operating its water and sewer systems. So we'd like to see surpluses in those funds as well. Just a couple last schedules. If you turn now to page 81, I did want to point out the trends that the city is showing for its net pension and retiree healthcare liabilities, net OPEB liability. So on page 81, we can see that the city's police and fire defined benefit pension plan, the total pension liability, according to the actuaries, as of June 30, 2019, came in at $14.2 million. And then if you look about 2/3 of the way down, we can see the planned fiduciary net position, or the assets, so to speak, came in at $11,289,000. The difference between the assets and liabilities were $2.9 million. So the net pension liability for the police and fire pension plan came in at the $2.9 million. If we take the total assets and divide it by the total liabilities, the city is 79.47% funded, much better than the 60% that's expected by Treasury. So a little bit less than where you guys were at 2018, but for the most part, holding steady right around 80%. If you turn now to page 84, 3 more pages, we get a look at the same schedule, but this is for the city's MERS defined benefit pension plan. So the city's pension plan is there are 2 of them, MERS and police and fire. The MERS plan has different dates. So the MERS uses December 31st as their plan year end. So we're using the December 31st, 2018 data for the city's June 30, 2019 audit. Total pension liability, according to MERS actuaries, is $13.1 million, compared to about $9.4 million of total assets, leaving a net pension liability of $3,727,600 at June 30, 2019. And if we take the total assets divided by the total liabilities, the city's at 72% funded, down from 81% the year before. The reason for that, halfway down the page, you can see in the 2018 column, there was net investment loss of $390,671 compared to the year before, which had a $1.24 million increase in pension assets. The year before that, 2016, just over $1 million. Fourth quarter 2018, the market had a significant loss, bringing the total market performance to a negative for 2018 because the actuarial valuation was performed on December 31st, 2018. The city is showing a loss on its MERS plan, whereas it's showing gains on the police and fire pension plan. So did want to point that out. Still, you guys are about 12 points better than Treasury's expectation of 60% funding. The last schedule I have is page 86. This is now the 3rd year that the city has reported its OPEB, net OPEB liability. So the exact same concept here. The total OPEB liability, according to the actuaries, was $4.46 million compared to $3.4 million of total assets, leaving the net OPEB liability of just under $1.1 million. And if we take the total assets divided by the total liabilities, the city's at 76% funded for its retiree health care, which is approximately 76% better than most of our clients. So you guys are much better off in terms of funding your retiree health care than most local units in the state of Michigan. So certainly prudent in terms of getting those assets set aside to cover it. State of Michigan Treasury expects 40% funded. You guys are almost double that. So very, very healthy when you look at the funding of your defined benefit pension plans. So those were the highlights I had, and I'm certainly happy to take any further questions.
I don't have any questions, but thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate your highlights, so,
Yeah, sounded like good news, so
Sure.
yeah.
a lot of good news.
Okay. Nothing else.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. And so that takes us to several appointments for this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take the first one before
Okay.
Sandy jumps into the rest of them. I can advise that Councilmember Shippers, although ill tonight, had indicated her willingness to continue to serve as the alternate on the Board of Review, unless anyone else wanted to jump in on that. There are certain issues whereas you can't be on another board. I know that's created some conflicts with other members. And Councilmember Ingalls is still interested in serving as the primary for that board. So perhaps
Great. Thank you.
we can have a motion appropriately that will establish that.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. I will make a motion to appoint myself, Robert Ingalls, as a regular member of the Board of Review, and T.I. Shippers as the alternate member to the Board of Review for a one-year term to expire on January 21st, 2021.
Support.
Councilmember Ellenboss?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Shippers? Mayor Folkins?
Yes, motion carries.
Being recommended to approve the reappointment of Jennifer Brown to the Local Development Finance Authority for a 4-year term to expire on January 21st, 2024.
I'd go ahead and make a motion to approve the reappointment of Jennifer Brown to the Local Development Finance Authority for a 4-year term to expire on January 21, 2024.
Support.
Councilmember Ingalls?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Shippers? Ellenboss?
Yes.
Mayor Folkins?
Yes, motion carries. Don't be afraid.
Being recommended to approve the reappointment of Mike Filiomeni to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority for a 3-year term to expire on January 21st, 2023.
I'd go ahead and make a motion to approve the reappointment of Mike Filiomeni to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority for a 3-year term to expire on January 21, 2023.
Support.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Shippers? Ellenboss?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Mayor Folkins?
Yes, motion carries.
Being recommended to approve the reappointment of Larry Bontrager to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a 3-year term to expire on January 21st, 2023.
I'll make a motion to approve the reappointment of Larry Bontrager to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a 3-year term to expire on January 21st, 2023.
Support.
Councilmember Shippers? Ellenboss?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Mayor Folkins?
Yes, motion carries.
Being recommended to approve the reappointment of Charles Labar to the Cemetery Board for a 3-year term to expire on January 21st, 2023.
I make a motion to approve the reappointment of Charles Labar to the Cemetery Board for a 3-year term to expire on January 21st, 2023.
Support.
Councilmember Ellenboss?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Shippers? Mayor Folkins?
Yes, motion carries.
Being recommended to approve the appointment of Jeremy Olson to the Election Commission for a 4-year term to expire on January 21st, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of Jeremy Olson to the Election Commission for a 4-year term to expire on January 21st, 2024.
Support.
Councilmember Ingalls?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Shippers? Ellenboss?
Yes.
Mayor Folkins?
Yes, motion carries.
Being recommended to approve the appointment of Jim Clements to the Cadillac Wexford Airport Authority for a partial term to expire on February 22nd, 2021.
Your turn.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the appointment of Jim Clements to the Cadillac Wexford Airport Authority for a partial term to expire on February 22, 2021.
Support.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Shippers, Ellenboss,
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries. And as we had a lot of appointments this evening, but I'd just like to take a moment to say that some of those are new appointments and some are people who have volunteered to serve on our boards or committees for years, and the importance of that volunteer work to the city. I just want to say thank you. Okay, so with all of those appointments, that takes us to the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Just a few items on the manager's report this evening. The first is regarding downtown sidewalks. There is no change before you. This is something that does come before you every year. We are looking at approving the downtown sidewalk cafes for both Clam Lake Bear Company and Herman's, and also the Raven Barbecue and Brewery. So for all three. There are two conditions that I'll read as follows. The Cadillac City Code of Ordinances that relates to sidewalk cafes in section 46-395 is followed, which includes a requirement for a site plan and proof of insurance that has to be in as well. And also, because these cafes are located on Business Route 131, which is a state route, they also need to get a permit through the state of Michigan. And so the state of Michigan also requires the local legislative body to provide the permit as well. So it's sort of it's a twofer.
Yeah.
So,
And I did see that the Raven was looking at possibly putting outdoor seating upstairs this summer too, so that's
okay.
exciting.
Great.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We've been waiting for that.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, site map, that means will tell us how many tables they want to put out in front of their store?
when they make their permit to us, it's more about where they're going to make sure that there's enough space for people with wheelchairs to get through and that the sidewalk's not being blockaded by the cafe.
Oh, I think they're great.
Mhm.
I like them.
Great.
Could you mention briefly what someone should do if they have a problem with these tables and there's not enough clearance or not enough way? They should
Call us.
complain right
Yep.
to the city?
Yeah,
Yep.
call the city. And every year, we will get a couple that'll come in. We'll check it out, verify whether or not they're within the distance requirements that they have to be. And if they're not, then we tell them that they need to move the tables. So,
I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the request of the Clam Lake Beer Company, Herman's European Cafe, and Raven BBQ and Brewery to have sidewalk cafes in front of their businesses in 2020, subject to the conditions noted.
Support.
Councilmember Shippers, Ellenboss,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries.
moving right along, the next item is regarding our municipal water supply well drilling, change order number 1. Conditions warrant us getting a road in order for the contractor to be able to continue with developing the site. The change order is for an amount of $15,000. We're actually splitting this cost with the contractor. Otherwise, the city, at a point yet in the future, would have been responsible for the full cost of putting in the road. This will not put in the final road, but rather involve the installation of the base layer of the new pavement, and basically allow the project to continue to progress along. The recommendation this evening is certainly to award the change order to CS Raymer Water Supply Contractors in the amount of $15,000. Funds are available within our water and sewer fund accordingly for the project.
So while we're moving the $15,000 forward that we would have spent later, we are actually going to save $15,000 because the vendor will split it with us. So,
Correct.
good.
So a base layer, it's going to be a gravel road for now. Yeah, and then paved in the future. Yeah, okay.
I'll go ahead and do a motion to approve change order number 1 for the municipal water supply well drilling contract with CS Raymer Water Supply Contractors in the amount of $15,000.
Support.
Councilmember Ellenboss?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Shippers? Mayor Filkins?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. The next item is a request to set our various budget-related work sessions. The first work session includes a review of our vision and mission statements, our priority programs, which is another way of basically saying our goals or strategic objectives. And we'll also dive into the capital improvement plan. The next work session is where we do more of overview of the budget that's being presented to you for our next fiscal year. And the two dates that we have are February 17th at 4:15 and April 6th at 4:15. So the
That's good.
request would be,
And for Councilmember Ellenboss, those dates are on the same night as our council meetings. We just come in
Oh, you
early
just
for
come in
those
early.
meetings.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you.
sorry, good point.
So,
Yeah.
okay, would someone like to make that motion?
I will make a motion to approve the fiscal year 2021 budget work session dates as presented.
Support.
Councilmember Ingalls?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Shippers? Ellenboss?
Yes.
Mayor Filkins?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. What I believe is the final item under the manager's report is the request for the adoption of this year's hardship exemption policy. We are required every year to bring this forward. This policy goes to the Board of Review, and it essentially creates an asset test used to approve or deny hardship or poverty exemptions that the Board of Review may be looking at. The audit of minimum assessing requirements, or AMAR, does require the local unit to set the actual dollar amount. The included language in the policy is set this year at $50,000 as the asset amount not to exceed, excluding the value of the primary home. And it is the request this evening that council update the hardship poverty exemption policy utilizing the 2020 Health and Human Services Poverty Guideline, as well as a $50,000 asset guideline, excluding the primary home as our policy.
All right. I will make a motion to approve the updated hardship poverty exemption policy utilizing the 2020 Health and Human Services Poverty Guideline, as well as a $50,000 asset guideline excluding the primary home.
Support.
Councilmember King?
Yes.
Shippers? Ellenboss?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Mayor Filkins?
Yes, motion carries.
Mayor and members of the City Council, we're at the introduction of ordinances and resolutions section of our meeting this evening. For some, he may be a familiar face. For others, he may not be. But this evening, we do have Craig Patterson with the Woda Cooper Companies here to talk just briefly about the Maple Hill Apartments development that his company owns and is in the process of putting in some rather significant improvements to. The purpose for the item on your agenda this evening is nothing other than simply setting the public hearing, and the public hearing would be for the purposes of amending an ordinance that we already have in place in order to allow for the Woda Company to finish their construction activities and still qualify for the payment in lieu of taxes program that they're currently under with the city. So, Ms. Patterson?
Good evening, Mayor. Good to see you again, council members. Maple Hills up on the hill, Pearl Street. The last time I was here was in 2017 or 2018, to ask for a renewal on our pilot payment in lieu of tax. When we first got credits from MISTA in December of 2016, we had a target completion date by the end of 2019. The reality is, really at the end of 2018. Reality is that because of budget constraints, change in design, challenges with getting contractors because everybody's busy, we didn't really get construction started till January of 2019. Well, we're still under construction. We have one building finished. I went up there before a council member, and our most recent subcontractors say, why didn't you tell us that everything was buried under snow? And he's digging out, and he's putting up some of the gutters. But we are projecting that we will be finished with construction. I have 2 dates, Marcus. I think you may have seen the discrepancy. I think we're going to be done midsummer. Our enthusiastic field supervisor says April, but after being up there today, I think it's going to be more like June. But the real issue is that our pilot will expire here in the next 30 days, and the pilot is an important part of sustaining this property for the next 15 to 45 years. Some of you may know that we pledged to MISTA, who gave us the tax credits, that we would keep this property under affordable rents for 45 years. So I'm here to answer any questions and also to invite you at a time, sometime when it's warmer, to go up with me or our field supervisor and tour our improvements. $3.16 million in reinvestment in the community for that 24-unit property.
Thank you for the invitation. I was going to ask you if we could see it. And the question that I have is, how is it being received by the residents in the units that you already have done?
Well, I think there is some impatience. I mean, people are people, and we've made promises, but everybody is being relocated at our expense when we have to rehab their unit. But everybody going back to their units are very pleased, or back to the building. Very pleased with the amenities. We are adding a community room as part of the scope of work, which I think is very much welcome. It's not completed yet, but I think all in all, pleased.
The only thing I want to add for City Council is currently the draft ordinance extends it out by a total of 54 months. It's not 54 additional months. That's the total number of months. Before we have the council take final action on this item, which you would do presumably as a part of the after the public hearing at your next meeting, we'll just verify that number. It might make sense just to bump it to like 60 months or something like that. You know, a different number. Just want to make sure it's adequate. So.
Okay. All right. Okay. Any questions?
No, sounds good to me. No problem.
I'll
Okay.
go ahead and make the motion
Thank you.
Thank
to
you.
adopt the resolution to introduce ordinance to amend section 12-84 of the city code regarding duration of the Maple Hill Apartments service charge in lieu of taxes, and set a public hearing for February 3, 2020.
Support.
Councilmember Shippers, Ellenboss,
Yes.
Ingalls,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries. This evening, we do have the minutes from the Zoning Board of Appeals in their last meeting, and for our review when we have time to do that. And at this time, I'll open the floor for our last public comment this evening. Seeing no one, we'll close public comment and move to good of the order, if anyone has anything they'd like to share.
Nothing, Robert? Do I get to give my speech now?
Sure.
Excellent. I'm glad to be here, and whoever thought Brian Ellenboss would be setting up here as a commissioner. But seriously, I'd like to thank the Cadillac citizens that showed their confidence in me by casting their vote for me. I'm grateful to and hope to live up to your expectations. It's truly an honor to be sitting here where the likes of Keith McKellop and many other civic-minded people have sat. I'm very moved and proud to be here representing the residents of Cadillac, one of the best small towns in Michigan. I'd like to add one more thought. This board, which was created to enact and guide improvements to the city, has a duty to follow the desires of its residents. In order to do that, it is imperative that citizens speak up, clearly state their concerns about issues. Only by knowing these issues can you be fully represented. I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you at meetings or when I'm out riding my bike. What I'm saying is you got to get behind that microphone and let us know what you like or don't like. Pretty simple. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Okay, anything else? If not, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Welcome.